I thought I knew my limits. I thought I knew the boundaries between work, personal life, and imagination. But then, one seemingly ordinary Monday, everything changed. My boss, someone I had always respected and feared in equal measure, leaned over my desk with a mischievous smile that immediately set off alarms in my head. "I have a little experiment for you," he said, voice low and almost hypnotic. I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. Okay, experiment," I asked, trying to keep my tone light. But his eyes held a seriousness that sent a shiver down my spine. He slid a small envelope across my desk. Inside were a few instructions and, shockingly, a set of feminine clothing, blouses, skirts, delicate shoes, and even a little makeup kit. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. "You're supposed to wear these?" I asked, barely managing to get the words out. "Yes," he replied, calm, almost commanding. "For one day. Trust me, it's part of a fantasy scenario I've been imagining. Consider it research." My heart raced as I stared at the clothes. I wanted to say no, to push back, to walk away. But a mix of curiosity, fear, and a strange thrill made me hesitate. I could almost hear the tiny, mischievous voice in my head whispering, "What if this changes everything?" By the time I found myself in the restroom, closed off from the world, reality hit me hard. The blouse was soft and fitted, clinging to my shoulders and chest in a way that felt completely foreign. The skirt flowed delicately over my legs, a sensation I had never experienced before. I slipped on the shoes and wobbled, trying to get used to the unfamiliar height. The mirror confirmed what I already feared and hoped simultaneously. My reflection was different. Softer, gentler, more feminine. My features looked sharper, but somehow my entire demeanor had changed with the outfit. I could barely recognize myself, and a cocktail of panic and thrill flooded my body. Throughout the day, every movement was an education in vulnerability. Walking across the office, I felt the eyes of my co-workers lingering, whispers trailing behind me. My boss watched from across the room, his gaze calm and almost approving. My chest tightened, my face burned, but strangely, I couldn't look away from the attention. At first, it was mortifying. The small tasks, typing, carrying files, answering phones, felt monumental. Every step in those heels was a lesson in precision and balance. Every glance at a coworker felt like a test. And yet, somewhere amidst the embarrassment, I began to feel a shift. The exposure, the attention, the deliberate vulnerability, it was transforming something inside me. By lunchtime, I found myself moving with more confidence, if only slightly. My boss approached me, handing over a folder. "You're adjusting well," he said. "Good. Keep it up." His words were casual, but my stomach flipped. The thrill of being noticed, observed, and subtly guided underlined the entire experiment. I began experimenting subtly with posture, gestures, and expressions. Crossing my legs, tilting my head, letting my fingers brush against my hair. Each movement, small as it was, seemed to amplify the feminine persona I was inhabiting. And the strangest part? It felt exhilarating. The thrill of inhabiting someone completely different, of being both observed and admired, was intoxicating. The afternoon brought even more challenges. A meeting with clients meant navigating both professional expectations and my new presentation. The skirt swished with each step, heels clicking against the floor, and my voice felt higher-pitched and softer than usual. But I adapted, modulating tone, controlling gestures, and smiling in a way that felt natural yet undeniably different. After the meeting, a coworker whispered, "You look amazing. Really different, but in a good way." My heart raced. Pride mixed with embarrassment, confusion tangled with excitement. I realized that my transformation wasn't just clothing, it was presence, expression, identity. I was discovering a side of myself that was bold, confident, and visibly alluring, even in the most controlled environment of the office. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but electrified. Returning to my desk, my boss leaned in with a knowing smile. "See? I told you this would be enlightening." I nodded, barely able to find words. He had orchestrated more than an experiment. He had forced me to confront vulnerability, attention, and the thrill of inhabiting a new persona. Walking home later, heels sore, clothes delicate against my skin, I realized something profound. The day had been more than a fantasy, it was a revelation. I had been pushed to explore boundaries, navigate scrutiny, and embrace a side of myself I had never dared to inhabit. I had discovered resilience, confidence, and empowerment in vulnerability. By the following week, I found myself reflecting constantly on the experience. The clothing, the attention, the subtle power I had discovered, it had all left a mark. I wasn't just the same person I had been before Monday. The experiment, my boss's fantasy, had unlocked a dimension of identity, expression, and confidence I could never have imagined. I realized that sometimes, what seems like control or manipulation can also become a lesson in courage, self-awareness, and transformation. And sometimes, the most unexpected experiences, like being forced into someone else's vision, can reveal truths about yourself that you never knew existed. By the time I stood in front of the mirror again, blouse soft against my shoulders, skirt flowing over my legs, I smiled at the reflection. It was me, yes, but also something more. Stronger. Confident. Poised. Empowered. And I understood finally that fantasies, other people's or my own, have the power to reshape who we are, if we let them. That day had changed me forever. Once I locked the office door behind me, the reality of what I was doing hit me full force. The blouse was soft, delicate against my skin, and the skirt, pleated, light, almost fragile, felt completely foreign. My hands trembled as I touched the fabric, the weight of the heels making me wobble. I had never felt so exposed, so aware of every inch of my body. I took a deep breath and looked into the mirror. My reflection was unrecognizable. The softened lines of my jaw, the subtle curve of my waist, the way the skirt hugged my hips, it was me, yes, but different. Vulnerable. Feminine. And, to my surprise, oddly exciting. I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, "Who is this?" Curiosity began to creep in. I experimented with small movements, tilting my head, shifting weight from one leg to another, letting my fingers brush lightly along my hair. Each motion was deliberate, awkward at first, but gradually more natural. My reflection seemed to respond, as if the girl in the mirror were learning along with me. Next came the voice. Speaking softly, slightly higher-pitched, I read through a stack of documents, testing intonation, pitch, and subtle expressions. The sound startled me at first. It was my voice, but not my voice, gentle, airy, almost melodic. I practiced a few times, experimenting with inflections, pauses, and the way words flowed. Then came posture. Sitting, standing, walking, it all demanded attention. The heels clicked against the floor, skirt swaying with each step. I stumbled once or twice, heart racing with embarrassment, but I quickly adjusted. I realized I was learning, slowly mastering movements I had never considered before. The process was exhausting, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Hours passed, and panic gave way to fascination. I tried makeup, foundation, blush, mascara, following the instructions my boss had left. Each brushstroke felt transformative. My eyes widened, my cheeks flushed, and the reflection stared back at me, no longer fully me but not entirely someone else either. A strange thrill bubbled inside. The vulnerability of this new persona was intoxicating. I practiced small gestures, crossing my legs, tilting my chin, soft smiles. Each movement made me more aware of my body, of how I could control presence and perception. The locked outfit, initially terrifying, had become a tool, a forced lesson in poise, subtlety, and confidence. By the end of the afternoon, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. My legs ached from the heels, my face tingled from concentration, but my mind was alight. I realized that something profound was happening. This experiment, this fantasy my boss had orchestrated, was teaching me about vulnerability, attention, and self-expression in ways I had never imagined. I wasn't just a person wearing someone else's clothing. I was inhabiting a new persona, exploring new dimensions of myself, discovering courage in exposure, and even beginning to enjoy it. The fear that had gripped me that morning had transformed into curiosity and empowerment. I looked at the mirror one last time before leaving the office, brushing my hair back and adjusting the skirt. The girl staring back at me wasn't just a reflection of the clothes. She was a version of me I hadn't known existed, bold, delicate, aware, and slowly, irresistibly confident. The next morning, I walked into the office with my heart pounding like a drum. The blouse was perfectly fitted, the skirt swaying lightly with each step, heels clicking softly against the floor. Every glance from coworkers felt amplified, every whisper like a spotlight trained on me. My boss watched from across the room, calm and approving, as if he were orchestrating the entire scene. At first, panic threatened to take over. The soft fabric brushing my legs, the gentle sway of the skirt, it made me hyper-aware of every step, every gesture. I stumbled slightly while carrying a stack of files, cheeks flushing, but my boss's subtle nod gave me courage. Breathe. Own it, I told myself. Walking through the office, I realized that every interaction was a new lesson. Simple tasks like answering phones, filing documents, even speaking in meetings required poise and careful attention. My voice, higher-pitched and softer than usual, drew curious looks. Whispers followed me like shadows, but slowly, I learned to harness them, projecting confidence with gentle smiles and subtle gestures. A coworker, usually quiet and reserved, leaned in during a meeting. "You look really good," she whispered. My stomach flipped. Pride mixed with embarrassment. The thrill of being seen, noticed, even admired, was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And I realized, the experiment wasn't just about clothes, it was about presence, identity, and subtle power. Lunchtime brought its own challenges. Sitting at the cafeteria table, skirt locked tight, I felt every movement magnified. Whispers trailed behind me, glances lingered. But I began experimenting deliberately, crossing my legs gracefully, tilting my head, letting my hands brush lightly over my hair. Each small gesture reinforced the persona I was inhabiting, making me feel more in control, more expressive, and surprisingly, confident. I started testing boundaries subtly. A walk to the printer, a casual chat with another coworker, a polite nod in the hallway. Every interaction became an exercise in poise. I was learning how to navigate scrutiny, attention, and subtle power in ways I had never imagined. The skirt, initially a symbol of restriction, had become my teacher. By mid-afternoon, I was moving with increasing confidence. Clients visited, and I had to present with poise, voice controlled, gestures deliberate. The swish of the skirt and click of heels were no longer distractions, they became extensions of my presence. Compliments started coming, some shy, some bold. "You look amazing," said a colleague with genuine admiration. My heart raced, a mix of embarrassment and exhilaration. The real turning point came later that day. My boss leaned over my desk, whispering, "See what you're capable of." The thrill of attention, the realization that I had navigated a day filled with scrutiny and exposure without collapsing, filled me with a strange, intoxicating power. I wasn't just surviving this fantasy, I was mastering it, learning to command presence, and discovering confidence in vulnerability. By the end of the day, I caught my reflection in the office window as I left. The girl in the blouse and skirt stared back at me, soft, poised, confident. I had transformed far beyond clothing. I had discovered resilience, subtle power, and a new understanding of identity. The day, my boss's fantasy, had forced me to confront fear, attention, and vulnerability head-on. And I had emerged stronger, more confident, and undeniably empowered. Walking home, heels clicking against the pavement, I realized that the experience had shifted something fundamental. It wasn't just about wearing someone else's clothes, it was about inhabiting a persona fully, embracing vulnerability, and discovering a strength I never knew existed. It was Thursday, and the office felt different somehow. I could sense the undercurrent of anticipation before I even arrived. My heels clicked confidently against the floor, skirt swaying perfectly with each step. I had mastered balance, posture, gestures, but today, I would be tested in ways I hadn't anticipated. As soon as I entered, my boss called me into his office. The door closed behind me with a definitive click, and suddenly, I was acutely aware of every detail. The soft blouse against my arms, the skirt swish, the heightened pitch of my voice. He smiled, leaning back in his chair, eyes intense. "Today," he said slowly, "I want you to meet a client in this outfit. A high-stakes meeting. How you carry yourself will determine everything." My chest tightened. A client. In this outfit. The stakes felt terrifyingly real. My mind raced, I can't embarrass myself. I can't ruin this. But I also can't go back to being the same. When we entered the client's office, I immediately felt the weight of every gaze. The client, a sharp, commanding woman, raised an eyebrow and glanced at my outfit. I froze for a heartbeat, feeling the familiar pang of self-consciousness. But then I remembered every lesson of the past few days, the sway of the skirt, the tilt of my chin, the subtle gestures and gentle voice that had become my armor. "Good afternoon," I said, voice soft but confident, hands resting lightly on the folder I carried. The client's eyebrow lifted slightly, a small smirk forming. And then, she leaned back, intrigued. Conversation began, and I found myself responding naturally, gestures flowing, voice steady. Each nod, each smile, each careful movement reinforced my presence. It was terrifying. Every moment felt amplified, as though the room itself was measuring me, testing whether I belonged here, not just as an employee, but as this new persona I was inhabiting. Midway through the meeting, a sudden slip of the tongue, a small misstep with my skirt, made me freeze. I imagined disaster, imagined laughter, imagined embarrassment. But something inside clicked. Instead of recoiling, I corrected myself gracefully, a soft laugh escaping, and continued. The client's attention didn't waver. In fact, it seemed even more engaged. In that moment, I realized something profound. The vulnerability I had feared, the exposure I had dreaded, was no longer a weakness, it was power. Every glance, every whisper, every observation could be navigated. I could inhabit this persona fully, confidently, without fear. After the meeting, we returned to the office. My boss's gaze lingered on me, approving, almost proud. "You handled that beautifully," he said quietly. "You've learned more than I ever expected." I smiled, chest still fluttering, realizing the truth. I hadn't just survived this experiment. I had embraced it. The skirt, the blouse, the delicate heels, they weren't confining me. They had forced me to confront fear, attention, and identity. And I had emerged stronger, more confident, and empowered. Walking back to my desk, I felt a shift in myself. No longer just an employee navigating a boss's fantasy. I was someone who had discovered resilience, poise, and a new understanding of who I could be. I had taken control of vulnerability, mastered presence, and found exhilaration in expression. By the evening, alone in the office, I looked in the mirror near the elevator. The girl staring back wasn't just a reflection of clothing or instruction. She was a version of me I had never met before, soft yet strong, vulnerable yet confident, delicate yet commanding. The climax of the day, the confrontation, had forced me to choose, hide behind fear, or step fully into this new identity. I had chosen the latter. And in that choice, I realized something remarkable. Empowerment often comes not from comfort, but from facing exposure, attention, and vulnerability head-on, and learning to own it completely.